beginning, there was word, there was rumor. We touched our eyes, it metastasized, and then became a trumor. It found the ripe, the youth, the early bird, the latest bloomer. It struck the generations X, Y, Z, and baby boomer, supposedly constructed in some other foreign land, bio-diabolical, but birthed by human hand. Weaponizing Mother Nature, stockpile on a shelf. And in the wild, done drop the vial and loose it on yourself. The soup du jour was speculation every single hour, paired with racist accusation from the first world power. Bent on blaming origin, not seeking the solution. Fueled the social media with tabloid trash pollution. Reputedly, the virus be already on our shores. Close the borders, close the airports, shopping center doors. It escalated quickly, and what was noted in despair is we all approve a lockdown when it happens over there.
At the beginning of January 2020, we were all hopeful. I was in the middle of my first year in high school, as well as being a young journalist.
The past few crazy years were over, and we were ready to look up at the new decade with a fresh mind. We had parties to celebrate and drew fortunes to predict the upcoming year. It was a new beginning, a new slate of opportunities for everybody. We never knew that these few months of relative joy and optimism would turn out to be the calm before the storm that would send a massive flood over our society. Adapting. It was a key part of getting through the new storm. But how could we adapt when things were changing so rapidly? Back then, I barely had time to breathe, let alone adapt. But I believe that adaptation is what's important to learn, and even more important to take with us to our next step as the world continues to evolve and add more crises to our plate.
To take our past surprise and turn that into resilience and courage for the future.
I'm a filmmaker and artist who, despite experiencing my 14th year of existence in the middle of a pandemic, refused to believe that anything stranger than my experience of drinking an egg cream for the first time could exist.
I remember the 2020 New Year's party where I first drank it. I enjoyed the carbonated chocolate milk flavor, but it was off kilter, like what happened next. The universe tipped, like a giant hand flipping over a table, and we were forced to adapt and change. Right then and there, I found out how unpredictable life can be, but I think it was a worthwhile lesson. Adaptation is how humanity survives, but back then, none of us were ready, and some of us refused to change. From buying up everything, rampant racism, and protests against the lockdowns, the world felt like a ride I never asked to be on. Life had gotten so comfortable that people didn't want to adapt to this new situation. However, it soon became very clear the longer we refused to change, the longer this is going to take to fix.
And the more it would become permanent.
I'm someone that thinks a lot, and I love my ideas and creativity. But during the pandemic, I've had one nagging thought. How can we adapt?
How can we move forward past the lockdowns and the guidelines that are meant to keep us safe now, but give us fear of the future? As I pursued my dreams and connected with friends this year, that thought of adaptation always came back to my mind. That's why I'm here. To get the answers I need that can become our generation's roadmap for the future. This question of what we can learn about adaptation from those on the front lines of this pandemic should teach us how we can adapt to future crises.
If we can learn that now, we can guide our own path.
My name is Leah Patmore. I'm a frontline healthcare provider. I've been nursing for 33 years. I'm a licensed practical nurse. The moment that I felt would have a big impact on my life was specifically March 16. I'd been away for a couple of days. I went to visit my mom in her care center. I had concerns pre-COVID about long-term care. I was fearful that I would have to work frontline during this pandemic. I was very worried about my mom being in a care center. I was very much of an advocate for family center care, which I felt was going to be lost. It's very, very important to have family center care and to have involvement with the patient at all times and to check on your loved ones.
When the lockdown started, I was doing the usual.
Avoiding homework, writing, watching TV on my laptop. Suddenly, my sister bolted down the stairs and told me that school was canceled. She cheered because she didn't have to do a test she was dreading. Honestly, at the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed at most the pandemic was going to last till summer, but with news and rumors coming at us from all directions, my friends were anxious, and as much as I don't want to admit it, so was I. So, to survive, I just went with it. Each announcement and each passing minute didn't faze me nearly as much as others I knew. Part of what helped were texting friends and optimism. I assisted the AWCS Youth Writing Program to adapt to the new online situation by being part of the Youth Council and teaching younger kids through Zoom, keeping everyone connected while we were all apart.
I was still anxious, of course, but ignoring it helped me manage.
My name is Em Williamson. I'm a Bachelor of Arts in English. I got my degree from St. Mary's University last May. I'm currently working as a teaching assistant and poetry instructor, but I've also worked a lot of very crappy retail jobs in the past. So I was in university when the pandemic started. I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in English, and we went online partway through the semester, which at first I actually kind of enjoyed because it was just an excuse to be in my pajamas and stay at home for a couple weeks. But then we started approaching the end of the semester, and my English class was supposed to present our theses, our capstone papers, in this big conference to friends and family and some of the faculty. And I was really excited to present my paper because mine had to do with the topic of lesbian visibility in literature, which is something that is really close to my heart. But then suddenly I heard that we would still be online and it wasn't safe for us to have our conference and we wouldn't be able to do that. So that was when that started really taking a toll on me, I guess.
When I first heard of the pandemic, it was from my parents.
All that I knew at the time was that there was an illness of sorts circulating around Asia, which was a concern since we had family living in the Philippines. I, however, was indifferent to it since I believed that it wouldn't reach us here in Canada. If it was all the way across the world, then it shouldn't be a big deal, right? It wasn't until we were back, learning in school and in person, that my joking mindset around the virus really started to shift. I wasn't all too wary. It was just a mask, sanitize your desks, stay 6 feet apart. But then I started to see people disregarding regulations. Sitting with friends in large groups, pulling down their masks and talking. There were even announcements over the PA system about regulations. And on top of that, people started getting sick, and entire classes were sent home from just one case of COVID. I remember getting sick, having to go home and getting the COVID test. Luckily, it was just a cold, but the people that were testing on the front lines, they put their lives at risk every day to help us. There were real lives all around me that were at peril. I saw that. That scared me, seeing the effects of COVID in person and affecting the people all around me.
That's really what made me take the pandemic seriously.
I'm Walter John Williamson. I'm a teacher here in Calgary. I've been teaching since 1997 or 1998, I think. Most of my career has been spent in the diverse learning area. I also teach English. I have a PhD in education, which I wrote as a detective novel. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was a little bit surreal. I couldn't believe it was happening, even though I'd been hearing around the world that it was going to happen, and you know, I'm a bit of a pessimist, and I've seen a lot of disaster movies, so I knew it was going to be bad. I felt very afraid and sad for many of my students who live more precarious lives than me, for whom income is actually a problem. I feel for like 2S LGBTQ plus students who are not yet out to their parents, or who live in families who are, you know, hostile to their identities, that they're stuck in those family units for longer frames of time than they would be otherwise, with no real means of escaping.
I remember taking a day off school, not realizing it was going to be my last day ever.
Looking back at it now, I would have gone if I knew it was going to happen. Because after that, I felt completely lost in the current events. Everything shut down in an instant. I don't even remember my last day of actual school, or my last writing club meeting, or even what I was doing the week before, because there was nothing to remember. It just ended, and my life as an online student began. The worst part of the quarantine initially was the monotony and lack of control. It's like someone else was directing my life and I just had to stand there and wait. Our grades were frozen, but I was told that any lack of work would be on the report card. That was a lie. They wanted everybody to do the work, but nobody cared, including me.
I didn't need to do any schoolwork. I didn't need to do anything. I was just tired.
My name is Wakefield W.O. Brewster, aka The Lyrical Pitbull. I'm a professional poet and spoken word artist, and I'm also a registered massage therapist. Those were my two greatest feet, greatest steps into the world. Left foot, a world of words. Right foot, a world of wellness. The beginning of COVID for me was a realization that I'm going to live through something that's happening, not read about something that's happened. I'm a public speaker. I teach all kinds of public contact that shut down in every capacity. I'm a registered massage therapist. I have to touch people. Gone. I was with a patient and I was performing a massage treatment. And when that treatment was over, my colleague came in and let me know. They said, Wakefield, we're shutting down. It's real. It's March 19th, and we've just got it on the news. Sterilize your room, grab all your stuff. We're going home. I was on vacation, and for the first time, my brain took a breather. For those of us who found some upswings in COVID and found some relief in being relieved from the rat race, we found that hanging out with ourselves is actually pretty cool.
A rush and a push and the hustle was on, a dim kind of dawn, woven with worry. News had it that all the good gon' be gone. All in a flurry, everybody scurry. Quick, fast, mobilize, plan, hand sanitize. Must get to the stores, don't touch any doors. Now we on the hurry, and I heard without a doubt. Hurry leads to worry, and then worry wears you out. Time off if they could, taking that time up. Everybody getting good with a long line up. 6 feet apart, mask on, tied back. How humans hold space now is the new black. Forget the old norm, we ain't going back. Canadian politeness purely on the slack. Once was a and we heard bless you. Now it's a and we hear F you. Heads and shoulders, knees and toes. Best you watch for these elbows. Never touch where fluid flows. Both eyes, mouth and nose. Buying up a whole shelf, putting nothing back. Karen, she ain't sharing, so let's cut out all the crap. Superstore, Walmart, Amazon, Costco, bye-bye small biz, that's where the costs go. Lockdown, isolate, flipping well wishes. Shopping online, then skipping them dishes. Once was a small biz, only had potential. Funny now what it is that we deem essential. Fast food, cigarettes, isopropyl, alcohol, cannabis, TP. Load up on the Lysol, only out for self in our panic and our fear. But What about the clerk? And what about the cashier?
So during the pandemic, it was really, really difficult getting a job because a lot of places were like cutting down staff or like weren't hiring or all sorts of stuff like that. So I ended up doing a lot of really like very awkward interviews over like Zoom or like over the phone and stuff like that. And a lot of them just like completely went nowhere, and that was quite discouraging. So it was definitely the first situation where I had to deal with something like this as an adult. Am I wasting this time of being young when I have all this stuff I can do? Like, is this time just being sunk into being in a pandemic and having to quarantine and not being able to do anything?
After a month, when COVID-19 became a routine part of my life, I finally began to adapt.
Transferring from school to online was tough because our grades weren't changing. I didn't do any schoolwork. One night at the dinner table, I said to my parents, "Listen, I've passed all my classes. I want to do other things I usually don't have time for." They pushed back at the idea for a bit, wanting me to be productive and not lounge around all day. But after I explained I will still be productive, we came to an agreement. And productive I was. With school gone, I was free to dream and do things I loved. It was really nice. I started with rearranging my bedroom, then doing some script writing. I made an online Dungeons & Dragons game, took a free college course in TV writing, and I wrote short films for local events and for friends' Lego stop-motion shorts. The flexibility of it all was amazing. Even though I was anxious and tired from the constant news about the pandemic, I actually enjoyed myself. COVID-19 gave me the freedom and time to create.
It's something I plan on continuing even now.
The moment that I felt challenging working in a pandemic was delivering the news to others regarding our policy of visitor restrictions, regarding our policy of wearing a mask at all times. It's very hard to deliver that message. Working in PPE all day, masks, gowns, eye protection, staying hydrated during this, making sure that you double checked yourself that you weren't breaking any kind of chain working with COVID, that you were going to bring anything into your home or to my friends.
Mentally, I don't think that I adapted well at first. The joy of having more free time eventually warped into apathy.
Feeling nothing, feeling empty. I clearly remember one night where I slipped from my office chair and simply laid on the floor since my body was too tired and depressed to move. I stopped attending classes, my regular timetable was broken, and I spent more time lazing around. Only weeks after the lockdown started, my ability to mentally keep up with work faded. This decision to not focus on school came with both upsides and downsides, however. An unforeseen consequence to my decision was that my social activity online took up a larger chunk of my attention. It fueled unhealthy habits and ate up all my time. During the summer, my plan was to take math and be done with it for the rest of high school, but I was too tired and unmotivated to work. I had to quit half a month after starting since I couldn't balance my workload and my mental health at the same time.
The pandemic was really affecting both my body and my mind.
I realized when I went through my contacts, I had a stack of business cards about that thick. And it was everyone who had at least given me the time to say, "Hello, this is who I am." And I realized I had not contacted any of those people. I went through every single one of them. It was about 78 to about 100. And I left an email, I gave a phone call, a voicemail, a fax. I did whatever I could. Even if a number was out of service, I would look for them online. But I reached out to every single person, found almost all of them. And when COVID lifted, after the first 90 days, boom, I was busy as an artist and in business because I had made all these contacts. So it taught me to not procrastinate. Well, I can say this. I did run into a particular artist who is a literary person and a musical person, and said to me, "I'm not going to be getting hired to work when this began." I was like, "Why?" And he said, well, you know, kids can't learn through the screen. Little kids, kindergartners. And he said they can't learn through a screen. I was like, did you miss Sesame Street? I think the only thing I can say is my calendar embraced it. Every single day of March, I'm booked doing something. There. That's how embraced it is. People are embracing me now that I am online, and that's what we have to use.
I had an online in-person blended program before the pandemic and was already accustomed to online school.
But despite that, it still had a serious effect on my life. Outside of schooling, I was relying on community classes and clubs like Dungeons & Dragons for social interaction and to keep me active. Unfortunately, the pandemic foiled those plans quickly, and the in-person groups were promptly replaced with a few Zoom calls a week. I need constant stimuli, so I helped reorganize my AWCS youth clubs and taught younger kids for a few bucks online. And let me tell you, there is not a dull moment when teaching elementary schoolers art on Zoom, with all of its rage-inducing bizarre glitchiness. I used to talk daily with all of my friends. We would meet up on Discord and text chat, or sometimes get on a call and talk. We would watch each other play video games and laugh until really late. But after a while, the conversation stopped. Everyone stopped hanging, talking, joking. Finally, it ended up with someone posting a joke once a week online that was a little too real. It all showed how angry everyone was with the pandemic and its effect on their lives. We just weren't sure if life was ever going back to the normal we knew. As someone who doesn't have a problem being alone, I learned how much I appreciate people. I learned that whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert,
Life is a balance, and the pandemic shifted the scales for everybody.
Yeah, and I gained 15 pounds, which wasn't great. I thought I would be more engaged and more resilient. I didn't think that working from home would make such a big deal because I do sort of identify as an introverted person. And so that was a negative surprise. A positive surprise is, especially going into the second school year of Zoom, I'm surprised at how much easier it's gotten to do like online classes on Zoom, and how much fun I can have with my teacher advisor group now that the students know that they're actually responsible for going to school.
Shut down. Still open. Social distancing. Social gathering. Shunning hugs. Shaking hands. Self-isolation. Hang with friends. Lockdown. Socialize. Quarantine. COVID parties. Common goal. Conspiracy. Common sense. Not common. Breaking news. Faking news. Information. Insolence. Fact-checking. Cherry-picking. Researching. Repeating. Healthcare. Hair did. Hospitals. Hoaxes. Novel virus. Flu kills more. ICU. I don't care. Virologists. Vitriol. Doctors. Denial. Nurses. Naysayers. Healthcare workers. Registered massage therapists. respirators, rebellion, numbers, negligible, statistics, supposedly, people, sheeple, vaccinations, anti-vax, masks, mask holes, public safety, aka the needs of the many are greater than the needs of the few or the one. My rights! Flatten the curve, flat earthers. Essential services, bars and pubs, frontline workers, fine dining, bylaw, bye-bye, mandatory, make me.
So, at one of my jobs that I was working at during the pandemic, I was working for a pretty big company, so it wasn't only like the provincial rules about like wearing a mask we had to follow, but it was also this company had like some very specific regulations about what actually counted as a mask and what didn't. So a lot of the time we would have to be telling people at the door that they couldn't come in because their mask didn't have like loops around the ear, which was what classified it for some reason. So this dude came in with his turtleneck pulled over his face. So our person at the door, of course, tells him, "Hey, sir, we're gonna have to give you a mask or give you a face shield or something like that. You just can't come in like this." And he freaks out and he starts yelling and he's like, no, I'm not gonna let you do that to me. You're infringing on my rights. I won't wear a mask. I won't wear a face shield. I won't do any of that. And our person at the door was getting like really stressed because like, of course you would in that situation. But the funny thing was this store was in the mall. And what ended up happening was that this Scottish lady from a jewelry store that was next door, for some reason took it upon herself to come help us. So she actually walked over from where she was at her store and she started yelling back at this dude and she was like, "You're gonna put on a mask or you're gonna get out of here. You gotta put on a mask. Stop yelling at these people. They're just doing their jobs." And he was yelling back at her and they were yelling back and forth. And, you know, eventually he just ended up leaving, I think. But that was quite a delightful situation because we sort of ended up being friends with these jewelry store people after that.
As time went on, my hyperproductivity suddenly came crashing down.
I burnt out. As far as anyone knew, I was doing well on the outside, but really I was going stir crazy. I felt trapped in my birdcage, needing to stretch my wings in the world. I needed to go outside. Not to see people necessarily, just to be away from home on the same four walls as myself. Instead, I just sat there, unmoving as things got worse. The light through the bars became blurrier and blurrier. I was too drained to do anything. I didn't feel I could adapt any more than I already had. All of this rest should have made me feel better, but it just made me more drained. Like everybody, I just wanted to lie down and shut my brain off all day, every day.
Like writer's block, but all the time.
You know, humans are really resilient in general. We're not as stupid as we like to claim. We're far kinder than we may be showing right now. And we're not moving through this not learning anything. For me, I know that the way I live today, pre-COVID, moving forward, is pretty on point. Honestly, if you take care of what you can in your life as best as you can, then it's easier to roll with the things you can't control. So I simply believe humans, smart humans, are not going through this pandemic not learning. The next big thing like this, because there'll probably be another, it won't be like this. It just won't. I look towards the future cautiously optimistic, as always. I don't remember who said it. Someone said it to me. They thought it was Sun Tzu who had said it. Maybe I'm misquoting. In chaos, there is opportunity. Disorder is a ladder. Now, if I got that all wrong and those are my words, remember they're mine.
In order to adapt to being at home, I reached out to more people over the internet, and I made closer friends than I can count on one hand.
Which is definitely more than I had in my in-person life. I never thought that I would have to make other friends outside of the people I saw at school. Luckily, many others started to meet online as well, and I made a new friend group which met daily, either to roleplay, which is sort of like a form of acting where you're playing the part of a character and creating a story with others, or straight up chatting. Having that ability to talk to them made me feel like I was in a community. We made promises to keep each other company when we needed it. Walking beside them through my struggles gave me motivation and the drive to hold on. Unfortunately, I would end up staying awake until the sun rose. I'd barely find time to eat since I wanted to spend all day talking with them. Even with those consequences, I'm honestly grateful for all the people that I met. They taught me how to accept things I never accepted before, and they were there whenever I needed a hand to reach out to. I believe they taught me how to be a great friend and supporter, something I might not have experienced without having to go through the pandemic cooped up inside my home. It's something that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life, something I'll never forget. Unfortunately, the stresses of COVID-19 proved too much. It wasn't just me, my whole online friend group went through it. Too much time online, not enough structure, family and world stresses. Over time, fights broke out and we began to split off. It wasn't abrupt, it was more like pressure building in a bottle that was bound to explode, making a silent wasteland of nothingness. I still talk with some of them from time to time, and a lot of those friendships will continue, but the group was broken.
It was a thing, and then it wasn't. Another victim of COVID.
I had a very difficult time accepting the policy of the no visitor restriction. It was not going to work for my mom. It was not going to work for me. We're better together. I made sure that I was in a safe practice in order to protect my family and especially my 98-year-old mother.
I think my biggest issue with the pandemic was definitely online schooling.
Which is not a perfect program at the best of times, and it only suited a small group of people. But when everybody was plunged into it, the cracks really started to show. For example, I was in an animation course during the first semester of this year. The course was supposed to take 3 weeks to complete and be a simple 1-credit class. Of course, this is on top of 3 other full classes in math, English, and science, which took up more than enough of my time on their own. However, in addition to those, I now had to deal with an animation course assignment to make a 20-second cartoon in just 1 week. A prospect that would have proved to be too much work for any one person if it had been in a classroom. But online, we could easily be ignored and just sent off to do our work. I spent days animating in my room, alone. If you look at the speed of professional animators, you realize how difficult work like this can be for untrained students to pull off. At least I had intentionally signed up for this online course. Not everyone had a choice. Everyone was affected by the sudden shift to online and weren't prepared. I think this definitely forced the CBE to rethink its methods of online education and adapt. Online school also disrupted our usual social connections because we couldn't see each other anymore. A lot of teens found they couldn't take the isolation after lacking in human interaction for so long. Meeting up with their friends outside or as close as they could get made up for that sense of friendship they were missing.
I knew that something had to change, but I wasn't sure how that was going to happen.
Since we became the online school, I've had the opportunity of working with grade 10s and 11s, and they're like lifeblood to a high school. They're just so excited to be at high school. They actually want to be in the clubs, and they actually want to have conversations during their teacher advisor group, and so I've always run a poetry slam club. Sometimes it's been very successful, sometimes it hasn't. And I've always run a Gay Straight Alliance or Gender and Sexuality Alliance club. And same thing, sometimes I've had a lot of enthusiasm, but it's like I start September with enthusiasm and then the kids just sort of gradually fade away. But this year, both of those clubs have been just like roaring like lions since September, and it's because of these online grade 10s and 11s that are just super excited to be in high school. So that's been a real blessing during COVID is like actually getting exposed to enthusiastic students.
If you ain't got a new norm, you got a new groove. From family to financial, COVID stab and stick and move. The pressure's problematic, putting patience on the proof. There were some who said that socialism was absurd, blustering without an understanding of the word. Now, like everybody else, they need a kicking from the CERB. Frontline workers, now we have them all in place. Essential on the services, a barely saving grace. Retail workers, some of them get spit on in the face. Back to school, this ain't cool, so many parents stated. Size of class plus social distance makes it complicated. When they heard the kids stay home, the parents then debated. Back to work, a public cry was heard across the board. Sorry, we stay locking down because our numbers soared. At least the grocery stores are open, some of us still hoard. Politicking, sickness is systemic. Uninformed but uniform and lacking academic. Privatizing healthcare at the peak of a pandemic. Getting through the different stages just like growing pains. Feeling changes, rearranges through the swells and wanes. Evolution at its best, for now we have new strains. Don't forget we have more than 2 million humans dead. Don't forget we only have an uphill climb ahead. Don't forget upon the backs of less are often tread. Don't forget the haves can always find some have to shed. Don't forget the truth is that compassion hasn't fled. Don't forget to take that deeper look inside instead.
Adaptation is a big word. It's something that makes us think that the whole world as we know it will become something entirely new, like what we have currently.
Life never gives you an easy time. There will always be difficulties, obstacles laying in front of you to try and block your path.
But the ways that people have adapted haven't been big at all. Some have changed the way they live, whether it be wearing a mask or finding ways to get kids to focus during a Zoom meeting. Compared to the world as a whole, the changes have been small.
The future looks interesting. I'm living in a generation who has gone through a pandemic during childhood.
Even after all of this, nothing will really go back to being truly normal, or the way that we used to think was normal.
Going through this as a child has taught me an important lesson. Life is unpredictable and does not care about how it affects us. I know, that sounds insanely depressing, but I think it is important to realize that once we understand that, it's easier to take control of the things that we can.
This is really because there isn't much we can personally do that will have a big impact, that will save the world per se. In this pandemic, we're helpless. But isn't that what adaptation is? I thought it was having to step up, but it's actually rolling with the punches, looking at what we've been given and making something greater out of it.
Not all bad has come out of this. This documentary would have never happened if we didn't capitalize on the global pandemic. It gave us free content and time to create it.
Our frontline workers have taught us that you can't do it alone. whether it be friends over the internet, students they've been helping, or their own family. All these elements help them make connections and community that gave them the strength to adapt.
We were worried about how hard making a movie during COVID was going to be, but with our adaptations, social distancing, limited crew, sanitized equipment, it wasn't easy, but hey, it all got done.
We all learned to adapt, both to our environment and to our changed selves. The past is a tool that we'll take to the future, precious people that we'll always remember. The connections that we've made during this time are extremely important and will always be cherished.
We, like the frontline workers we talked to, supported each other. Rome wasn't built in a day, nor was it built by one person, and a pandemic won't go away in a day, and it's only survivable with others by our side.
They showed us that everyone during the pandemic has been forced to change in some way or another. It's important to be aware of the different experiences they've had, because even if they don't necessarily apply to our own lives directly, there's always something to be learned.
Those working on the front lines have their own takeaways, but they all have that common theme of community. Their adaptations were made by interacting with each other and forming relationships. I've learned that there is no going through this alone. There will always be hidden opportunities waiting, and people reaching out for what they need. It's up to us to fill those gaps.
Over 7 billion people on this planet all needed to adapt in a short amount of time. I'm confident that even though we've been separated, none of us are alone. We'll survive this and future crises. We'll adapt together.
And over time, and finally, I got my mind right. Everything felt crystal clear when using hindsight. When I do consider all the things I worked at harder, I truly repeat most of them, but simply do them smarter. Mixing comprehension with compassion to the game. Perhaps with more intention, wheeling words to help reframe. Use empathetic listening first to lead the whole vibration, to close the commutation with emotional elation. Let us all try reaching out to check in with more folks. We've realized we've noticed lies behind their Facebook jokes. No matter how their heads should bow, one thing I'd surely say is that it's okay not to feel okay, but not to stay that way. Encouragement for growing and discovery of self, honoring your body and your state of mental health. Lifting one another up is how we rise to unity. Making place and holding space is how we craft community. Since we didn't see this coming and we weren't well prepared, no, we will not take this lightly even if we're double dared. For a sniffle, a sneeze, a cough, a wheeze has brought this planet shaking, quaking, breaking at the lungs. Home care, health care, lack of wealth care on their lowest rungs. I feel it. At that time, the hardest human work begun. We all shall have to live another COVID-filled day. News lady ain't the only one who going gray. There's the newbie causing traffic, and the man who does the weather. Yet, one thing I know for sure is that we're all in this together.